Leaders, real life leaders.
Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And we have Jonathan Goldhill. And our title today is How to Be a Disruptor in Your Industry. We want to know how to disrupt the status quo and to scale your business. So Jonathan, welcome.
Thanks, Chantel. Looking forward to talking with your listeners about this and how they can be a dominant force in their industry and maybe put themselves in a category of one.
Well, awesome. Well, let's get right into it. Give us some real practical stories or examples of people that you've seen that really have been a disruptor in their industry or how they've really disrupted the status quo of whatever industry they were in.
Great. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I started working with a client. His name is Justin White, and he runs a company called K&D Landscaping. It's based in Santa Cruz, California. And he's a great story to tell because one, he's given me the authority to share his story, and he continues to share it. So you can look it up on the web. And so he came to me as a next generation leader in his family's business. He was 26 at the time and really had a vision of 10xing his company. And so he came to me, and what we did was we started working on just some basic leadership discipline so he could really understand what it was going to take for him to lead his family's business into the next generation and how he was going to scale it. And one of the things that was like a pivotal inflection point moment was when we figured out what their purpose was. And we battled this around, came up with different ideas, but it probably was at a planning retreat. And we had been working on it for 6 months when finally we came on the idea of raising the bar. And when he and the rest of the team bought off onto that concept that we were raising the bar, everything seemed to change. At least in my eyes, everything seemed to change. The way they approached hiring and bringing people on board into their company and getting them accelerated into their systems and processes was all about raising the bar. And the way they showed up in the community was all about raising the bar. He became not only active in his trade association, but became like the chapter president of his local chapter and became one of the rising stars in the state, in the industry. And then, raising the bar meant like, what could they do in the community that would make them stand out? And so they started doing a pro bono project every single month where they would re-landscape a community garden, a community property. And so that was raising the bar. Everything they did around culture was raising the bar. They put a lot of culture initiatives to motivate and reward their employees and make them feel really special. And so I think purpose is so important. Most people have probably listened or read or watched Simon Sinek talk about like Start With Why and his TED Talk. And it's resonated with so many people because when you get clear on what your purpose is and when it's beyond profitability, when it's beyond survival, and when it is something that is transformative, where people literally get up, go to work, and realize that they are living their purpose and it's aligned with the company's, things really change. So that was like a real turning point. And I decided at that point that, I should probably write a book and come up with a framework, and purpose should be maybe my initial piece of my playbook in the book about how to scale your business. So I thought that was really interesting.
So you mentioned kind of up-leveling your hiring process and raising the bar with that.
Right.
And I think that that's something that it's just so frustrating right now. I know for me personally, we're trying to hire another web developer, and it's so difficult to find someone. So First, what would you say are the best practices that you've seen to kind of hire really top talent? And what are some of those tactics we can use? And number two, what would you say is some of the best hiring processes that you've seen put in place?
Yeah, great questions. And interesting, because I just got an email from someone who received my newsletter, which was specifically on this topic. Only he wasn't an entrepreneur. He was an employee who said, I've applied to over 100 different jobs, and I can't seem to get any traction. I've gotten one interview in 6 months, and I'm thinking like something doesn't make sense here. And I think I was really helpful to him in what I suggested. But so first thing I think is you need to make yourself a destination employer. And this is not something that's going to happen overnight. And so if you're looking to hire, 1 or 10 or 100 people right away, then you're going to have to work fast and furious on making yourself a destination employer. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you build the most attractive company, because marketing today is about marketing on the inside of your business and making your business so attractive that people want to come and work for you. And so by working on culture building initiatives and by promoting and publicizing your business in the community, by spotlighting key employees who have elevated through the ranks of the business. I mean, this was something that Justin has done with his company. He spotlighted key employees who came in maybe as a marketing assistant and are now an account manager or running or someone who came in as an estimator and is now like the commercial department leader. So building the culture is so important, and that is going to take a lot of time. And then as far as going about finding people and bringing them in, I mean, you have to be really proactive. I use a number of different techniques, which are the simplest of, go on Indeed or go on LinkedIn and look for people who are actually put their resumes out there and go and search for your candidate. But you need to also make the job description and the job offer as attractive as possible. If it sounds and looks like everybody else's, then it's not unique. It's not different. So if you're hiring an administrative assistant who's going to be the office greeter, then maybe call them the director of first impressions or something like that. Make it still searchable under office manager or administrative assistant, but make it interesting, make it compelling. And then as far as, and we can get back if I skipped over that question too lightly, but let's talk also about what is the process for now recruiting people, because I think you need to have a rigorous process for making sure that you're attracting the right people. There are most people, coaches would say, hire slowly, fire fast. Gary Vee would say, hire fast, fire faster. But whatever your methodology is, you need to have a screening process to make sure that first, culturally, the person that you're interviewing is going to be a right fit with the organization. And in order to do that, you need to know what your core values are, and you need to hire and select based on those core values. If this person does not seem like they're going to be a good fit, then you need to rethink that hire. And then you've got to obviously do competencies tests. And I use tools like predictive index or behavioral assessments to do some competencies tests. I recommend that you do 3 different interviews at a minimum in 3 different situations, maybe in 3 different by 3 different interviewers, so you can compare notes. I recommend tandem interviews, so one person's asking questions, the other person's taking notes, and so a lot of the techniques that I use come out of top grading, which was developed under General Electric, Jack Welch's tenure, and the other methodology is the WHO methodology. This was basically developed by father and son, and that was Jeff Smart and Brad Smart. I think these are great methodologies for actually selecting. But part of that also is really having a clear job description, which they call a job scorecard, and then evaluating candidates against that scorecard. So, is it likely that this candidate would be able to achieve the metrics that you're expecting, the results? You can call them OKRs if you like. Are they likely to achieve these results based on their experience? And are they a good core value culture fit? So I think that's pretty quick and cursory answer, but those are some of my initial thoughts.
Hey guys, I'm so excited. My new book, One Meal and a Tasting, is out now. And if you order the book on Amazon, just the regular paperback edition, if you go in and make a review, you will get the audio book for free. Send a copy of your receipt to questions@chantelrayway.com and you'll get the audio book right away.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about the scaling process. So
Sure.
When you go into a company, let's say you go into a medium-sized company, what are some of the biggest things that you see that you go, give us some real examples. So real life examples of you say, I went into the company, they were doing this. And I was thinking, you're not going to be able to scale if you're doing this, or you're not going to be able to scale if you're doing that.
Yeah. So 20 years ago, I went into a large bakery in Los Angeles, 500 plus employees. And I actually was brought in because they had just gotten a very large fine from OSHA, which is Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And obviously they were doing some not so best practices in their manufacturing of their, in their bakery manufacturing process. And so what we tried to do was coach each department leader in what are those best practices. We couldn't really address the health and safety concerns, but clearly they needed to have someone who was going to be a quality control, safety training person. Because at the time that I went in, the injury and illness prevention program was becoming a popular thing that OSHA was wanting every business to have. So clearly, investing in safety in an industry like that, but investing in training for any business is a best practice and it's a must. I mean, two areas that I see companies skimp on, at least in certain industries, like landscaping, for instance, is marketing. They don't spend much on marketing. And most companies don't spend enough on training. They don't train them in soft skills. They don't train them in technical knowledge. They don't train them in how are the business processes. And so what we did with this company was we developed with each department leader. So that would be like the finance department, the marketing department, the HR department, the manufacturing division, the retail. They had a retail restaurant. We developed KPIs, key performance indicators. We came up with a whole bunch of what we thought were leading indicators. They were leading because the results would end up on the balance sheet or the income statement. And we helped develop priorities, which were basically, some call them rocks, which were what are the things that we're going to work on that are going to remove the bottlenecks, the constraints. And so this is a long time ago, but today this company is a institution nationwide. They've got over 2,000 employees, and they are having priorities, better processes, and metrics that they're measuring on a regular basis. And so I think that the single answer to your question is training. Companies need to invest in training and training their people, because one of the most important things that people want when they come to a business is way beyond compensation. They want challenges. They want opportunity for growth. They want to be rewarded for improving. And they want to know that there's maybe a career path or a ladder. And that's only going to happen when you can train them up.
So give us something else. Like what else? Give us another example of something you've gone in and you've said, okay, here's someone's process for either onboarding employees or a process that you see in their training or whatever that you say, this is where I see there's a problem and why they're not growing.
Yeah. Well, I see it in most of the businesses that I work in. I see it that they're missing processes altogether. They don't have a scalable business because they don't have systems and processes that are delegated out. And so I'm talking to a client right now, or a prospective client, and they have a large construction company, and the person who is the CEO of the business has exited his prior construction company. He's come off of his non-compete, and he started a new construction company. And at this point, he's already over $100 million in revenue. And he's done this all by buying up other smaller, mid-sized construction companies. And so in 2.5 years, he scaled to over $100 million. And I'm talking and working with the HR person because she's come into a company that has no processes because they've just bought up all these other companies. So they've been really good at acquisitions, but they have nothing going on in terms of the culture, in terms of the onboarding, in terms of standard practices and procedures with regard to people, whether it's hiring, onboarding, training. There's nothing there. It's a complete blank slate. And so it's miraculous that he's built a $100 million company. But if you think about it, if it's just built on the backs of a lot of other companies, they've got their own processes and practices and procedures. But now it's about trying to create a unified company, a brand, unless you're just going to be an owner of a bunch of disparate companies, and then you might as well just be a family office. So that's a situation where processes are really missing. They're needing to be put in place. And the challenge is that the existing companies, incumbent companies, already have something. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we overlay a process on top of all these other companies and what the processes they have. So it's tricky. I can't give you an answer to that one yet. But I think that processes are the area that most companies seem to be lacking, and that's going to keep them from scaling. And
so I will tell you what I feel like has been a huge thing for us that we've now done is that we've realized the benefits of effective outsourcing on our non-core business functions.
Right.
And so for us, what we used to do is we would be like, okay, like we had an in-house person that did all of our payroll management, all of our staffing accounting, all of our, customer care services. I mean, just everything that we did. At one point, we were doing in-house, to the point where we even had, because we were selling so many houses, we had our own in-house photographers in different areas, on the areas that we were really big. And we're now in 15 states. But again, think about it. We could not scale if we paid for every new area that we were in to have a full-time photographer on staff, right?
Yep.
So it's just going through all the different positions and going, how do we find a company that we can outsource to? Because taking photography is not our core competency, right?
Right. I agree.
We wouldn't need that. Or, we had, just a full-time videographer to take videos of our different properties. Again, that's something that could be outsourced. And then when you're able to outsource all of that, then you're able to increase your in-house efficiencies, right? So like everything that's in-house now gets to be so much better. I mean, we had a full-time accounting person on staff, that did all of our bookkeeping and accounting functions. We've now outsourced that out. And so it's been really, really a blessing to be able to do that. So I want you to talk about some other examples like the one that I gave you.
Sure.
that people, number one, were able to cut cost, and they were able to have that opportunity to concentrate on their core competencies better?
Sure. So I think that's a great, I'm going to give you the good and the bad about outsourcing, I think. So the good, and I'll start with just myself, and then I'll move to another company. But I'm a business coach. And so I have discovered that the only thing that's really core and essential to what I do is coaching, and maybe to some degree speaking, educating, writing. But I've outsourced a lot of it. I've outsourced my marketing, all my social media. I've outsourced my accounting. I've outsourced article writing. I've outsourced obviously my financial, doing my bookkeeping. That's a no-brainer. I've outsourced my lead generation, appointment setting. I've outsourced so many things to the point where all I really have to do is coach and do podcasts. So that I think is a good example, and it works really well for me, and it's built a great lifestyle business. A couple other of my clients have outsourced positions that they never thought they could outsource. So I work with a lot of construction industry companies, and things like estimating, which is oftentimes done right now completely off of drawings that are all digital. So someone can be in another part of the world and doing that estimating. And I've had 2 clients that have successfully outsourced their estimating. Most of my clients are using some level of outsourcing, be it, not too many of them are using teams in the Philippines or India. But I do have one client who is using almost exclusively people in the Philippines. And so let me give you what I think is the downside, or the bad part of outsourcing, which is that this is a company who's got 120 employees, and most of them are drivers in a non-emergency medical transportation in business, and they're the leader they're the leader in their market. There's a couple other players that are significant. Obviously, all the drivers are they're employees, but they could be outsourced. But they're an essential function. But all the other functions, so marketing, recruiting, attracting candidates, their bookkeeping, they couldn't outsource some of their essential services like dispatching, like hiring drivers. But when we were working together as a leadership team, trying to organize the future of the business and develop a simple business plan that we could execute on, I found that I was dealing with a whole lot of outsourced people, none of whom were really leaders in that in the business, and so there was a lack of ownership or investment in the company, like someone who is inside the company. So I would say that maybe in a business like yours, as just an example, since you illustrated it, is once you outsource all those non-core, non-essential functions, you still need someone in-house who's like a department leader of those different outsourced functions. And so maybe you need a finance person who's outsourced, who's managing all the finance people. Maybe it's who's managing all the photographers and all the independent subcontractors. The downside I see of outsourcing is when there's no one inside who takes ownership of all those outside relationships. So I think that's a key thing for people. But look, outsourcing is a brilliant way of reducing your labor costs and also improving your ability to find talent, because talent doesn't have to be in your neighborhood, in a commutable distance. They can be, a ways away. But, I've seen it also with another company where they had an office in San Diego and an office in Tampa, Florida, and they had difficulty coming together as a team because they were using outsourced people in Cincinnati, in the Ukraine, in Brazil. And so there was a difficulty in the leadership team coming together and really feeling like all the players were present at the table. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, this has been great. Tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
Sure. So Jonathan Goldhill, the Goldhill Group is my coaching website. You can go to thegoldhillgroup.com. They can also find my book, Disruptive Successor, at disruptivesuccessor.com. And that's a guide for driving growth in a family business, but it's got a scaling methodology that's useful anywhere. Best place for people to follow me is on LinkedIn at Jonathan Goldhill. I also have a podcast called Disruptive Successor Show, which is at disruptivesuccessorshow.com.
Awesome. You guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Life Leadership. If you'd like to get the show notes or access more resources, log on to reallifeleaders.com/podcast to get the show notes from this episode and any other resources we might have mentioned. And also, we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to review or rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts to help spread the word. And if you have any leadership questions you want answered, email podcast@reallifeleaders.com.